Steve coming to you, Episcopal Priest serving here in the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. Currently have a 2-point charge, St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Clear Spring, Maryland, and St. Thomas Episcopal Parish in Hancock, Maryland. And we're doing, in this recording, the YouTube recording, we're doing chapter 13 of the study of the book of Revelation. Again, one of the resources I use is N.T. Wright's book, Revelation, 22 Studies for Individuals and Groups, besides using the Bible. And I'll also have some questions for you, some of my notes. So I encourage you right now to go ahead and read chapter 13 of Revelation. Chapter 13 of Revelation, and then come back and then we'll get in my notes and then we'll go into some of the questions. Okay, as you know, you can go through here, just pause the video and go to your questions and whatever discussions your group may have. So chapter 13, it's somewhat confusing, but as we go through the study of Revelation, we should get a sense of really who is John talking about being the beast. All right? It could be multi angles here. And we'll, discuss that. Is it the government, or is it Satan, or are they intertwined? So the dragon confers his power on the beast rising from the sea. So the beast becomes the dragon's agent on earth. Inspired from Daniel 7, the 10-horned beast represents Antiochus Epiphanes, the persecutor of Israel. In many aspects, the beast is a counterintuitive to a counterfeit of the Lamb. Counterfeit of the Lamb. Not counterintuitive, counterfeit of the Lamb, and therefore an Antichrist. Verse 1, the beast is the Roman Empire, and this is what I was saying. Now we're starting to see a little bit more who is the evil one here. Verse 4, question, who is like? A parody of the honors paid to the Lamb, and that goes back to Revelation 5:9. Verse 8, to adore the beast means your name is excluded from the book of the Lamb, eternal life. I'll repeat that. To adore the beast means your name is excluded from the book of the Lamb, eternal life. And then we look at verses 11 through 18 of chapter 13. The second beast, the prophet from the earth. The first beast rose from the sea, and the second beast comes from the land. Verse 16, a mark, a counterpart of the divine seal that marks the servants of God, and we go back to Revelation 7:3. So the mark is a counterpart of the divine seal that marks the servants of God. Remember baptism. An oil chrism. Verse 18, we'll mention this a couple of times, 666. The number of the beast. Many of the things people may know or remember from Revelation or the Bible in general is it's not good to have the number 666. Like an elevator. How many elevators go to floor 13? But anyway, we'll revisit this 666 several times. Okay? And I'll get back to that. I have more in my notes about the 666, but N.T. Wright writes something a little bit more concise about it, and we'll get into that. And those who do my in-person Bible study will have my notes about the 666, but also we'll get the more information or the concise information from N.T. Wright from his book about the 666. Okay? So having read chapter 13 of Revelation, let us begin here with what N.T. Wright says about the two monsters, and he always has an intro. A parody is what you get when someone produces a fake which looks real but isn't. Sometimes this is done deliberately for comic effect, as when people turn a Shakespeare tragedy like Hamlet into a short, funny skit or play, a Mozart symphony, on kazoos and mouth organs. Sometimes it is done with the intent to deceive, and if you deceive enough people, your parody becomes a new reality. That is what happened across the ancient Near East in John's day. The reality, as John and his readers knew, not least from his vision in the throne room, chapters 4 and 5, was that the one sitting on the throne was the all-powerful sovereign Lord of all creation. The parody, though, which was gaining ground all the time in Western Turkey through the first century, was that the Roman Empire, gaining its ultimate authority from the satanic dragon, was putting itself about as the world ruler. So, kind of an icebreaker question that NT has. What deception or cover-up do you recall that affected many people on a personal, national, or worldwide scale? What deception or cover-up do you recall that affected many people on a personal, national, or worldwide scale? Okay. All right. So we have several questions here, and I'll have another commentary. So read Revelation verses 1 through 10. Excuse me. What does John see rising out of the sea next to the dragon, and how does he describe it? And it's more in verses 1 and 2. What does John see rising out of the sea next to the dragon, and how does he describe it in verses 1 and 2? Okay. This passage draws heavily on a section from the Old Testament that was hugely popular in the first century. So go back and read Daniel chapter 7, verses 2 to 8. Go back and look at Daniel chapter 7, verses 2 to 8. What similarities and differences do you see between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13? What similarities and differences do you see between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13? As you're doing that, I can remember all these courses in college, compare and contrast. Wasn't crazy about those questions, those essay questions, but anyway, compare and contrast. All right. Another question. In verses 3 and 4, how do the inhabitants of the earth respond to the monster or the beast, as some translations put it? In verses 3 and 4, how do the inhabitants of the earth respond to the monster or the beast, as some translations have it? Okay, we following along? And looking at verses 5 through 8 of chapter 13, why does the monster make life miserable for the people of God? Why does the monster make life miserable for the people of God? Okay? Now, we'll look at verses 11 through 18. How does the second monster differ from the first one? How does the second monster differ from the first one? Now, looking at verse 11, why might John note the detail that this monster has two horns like those of a lamb? Why might John note the detail that this monster has two horns like those of a lamb? Okay, moving along here in chapter 13 and looking at verses 16 to 17. Why does the second monster require everyone to be marked? Why does the second monster require everyone to be marked? And that's in verses 16 to 17. Okay, now this next question or comment will probably come where we're seeing who is John really saying the enemy is, or is John saying the enemies are? And there's more to it as we read the book of Revelation. And you have to remember, why is John banned to that island of Patmos? Who put him there? Okay, so now here's a comment. For Christians at the time John wrote Revelation, worshiping or not worshiping Roman powers was quickly becoming the dividing line between people who were acceptable in the community and people who weren't. Not long after this time, some local officials introduced a formal requirement that unless you had offered the required sacrifices, you weren't allowed in the market. From quite early on, the Christians were faced with a stark alternative: stay true to the Lamb and risk losing your livelihood, the ability to sell or buy, or capitulate to the monster, sacrifice to Caesar at the behest of the local officials, and then everything will be all right. Accept your integrity as one of the Lamb's followers. We can understand the dilemma faced by those Christians back then. We like to think that we would always choose the reality and reject the parody. How are we tempted or to compromise our faith in order to make life easier? Okay, how are we tempted to compromise our faith in order to make life easier? I can think of one. What's distracting people from going to church on Sundays? That could be a springboard there. Okay. Question: what can we do now so that when we face even more serious situations, we respond well? What can we do now so that when we face even more serious situations, we respond well? Okay. Now I said I was going to get back to this 666, and I have a handwritten notes on this here, but I'm going to read what N.T. Wright writes about this, chapter 13, verse 18, about the 666. Okay, so here we go. The final verse of the chapter is one of the most famous in the whole book. It offers the greatest parody of all. It is more or less certain that the number 666 represents, by one of many formulae well known at the time, the name Nero Caesar. When written in Hebrew characters, many peoples and many languages use letters as numbers, as we would if we devised a system where A equals 1, B equals 2, and so on. So you get this? A is a 1, the letter B is a 2. The monster who was, is not, and is to come looks pretty certainly to be Nero. So you see what I'm talking about, who's the evil one here, and where's the 666 come from? But the number 666 isn't just a cryptogram. It's also a parody. The number of perfection would be 777. Okay? We know that 7 is a perfect number. 6 is incomplete. For John, there's little doubt that Nero and the system he represented and embodied was but a parody of the real thing. One short of the right number 3 times over. Jesus was the reality. Nero, just as dangerous, blasphemous copy. So there we go. Chapter 13 of the study of the book of Revelation. I hope that you're enjoying these YouTube study series. And as we move along, just stick with us as we study the book of Revelation. It's a confusing book, a scary book, but I also encourage you to do this with a group and don't speed read through it. Take time and discuss it. God bless.